Buenos and half a day, the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning is calling this confirmation and public hearing to order. Today's date is September 5th, 2024. The time is now 2:01 p.m. In compliance with open government law, notices of today's hearing were broadcasted on KUAM, provided via email to senators, stakeholders, and the local media, and posted to the Government of Guam Public Notices website on Wednesday, August 28th for the 5-day notice, and Tuesday, September 3rd for the 48-hour notice. I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues that have joined me here today: Speaker Therese Terlahi, Senator Telo Taitague, Senator Roy Quinata. The purpose of today's hearing is to receive testimony on the following agenda items: the executive appointment of Cathleen D. Moore-Linn to serve as a member of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board of Directors, to hear testimony on Bill number 328-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Roy Quinata and co-sponsored by Senators Dwayne T.D. Nicolas, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña-Barnes. It's an act to amend Section 5707A of Article 12, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, and to amend Section 1913C of Chapter 19, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the procedure for judicial review of decisions made by the public auditor in procurement appeals and related matters. The third item is to hear testimony on Bill number 329-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Telo T. Taitague and co-sponsored by Senators Joanne M. Brown, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña-Barnes, and Senator Agustin. It's an act to add a new section 104116.1 to Article 1 of Chapter 104, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to real estate brokerage agreements. And the last item is Bill number 338-37 COR, sponsored by Speaker Therese M. Terlahi and co-sponsored by Senators Sabina, Flores, Perez, Telo T. Taitague, Joanne M. Brown, Chris Barnett, Jesse A. Lujan. It's an act to amend Section 3207 and add a new Section 3229.1 to Article 2, Chapter 3, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to adding a new instructional tasting license. The rules of conduct are as follows. Those called to testify will be in the order beginning with government agencies and followed by those who confirmed ahead of time, and then followed by the sign-in sheet. We ask that you provide any written testimonies ahead of time before testifying so that we can facilitate dissemination to the public. And those providing oral testimony would first be recognized by the chair, and please state your name, organization, and position if relevant for record-keeping purposes. Senators will be given an opportunity at the end of each panel to ask questions, and questions and testimony shall be confined to the substance or nature of the public hearing agenda. Personal inference as to character or the motive of any senator or individual testifying is not permitted. So now to begin our agenda, to receive testimony on the executive appointment of Cathleen D. Moore-Linn to serve as a member on the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board of Directors for a term of 3 years from the date of confirmation. So just to give a little background, so the Board of Directors is really critical. It's basically their role is the management of Guam Environmental Protection Agency. And so Guam Environmental Protection Agency has a large list of mandates related to protecting our environment. So in the enabling statute, it lists the Guam Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the Toxic Substances Exposure Compensation Act, the Guam Beverage Container Recycling Act, Water Resources Conservation, Water Pollution Control, Toilet Facilities and Sewage Disposal, Air Pollution Control, Solid Waste, Water and Wastewater Operators Certification, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Environmental Pollution Control Act, the Guam Oil Spill Responder Act, the Choose to Reuse Munga Ma Adzek E Plastic Act, the Underground Storage of Regulated Substances Act, Above Ground Storage of Regulated Substances Act. And then it goes on that EPA shall also publishes notices of violation, orders of compliance, notices of defense, voluntary compliance, settlement agreements. So all of this is under the control over the board. And they oversee as well the appointment of the administrator as well as the deputy. So these are really critical, a critical position. And so we're really happy to have a nominee Kathleen here who accepted the nomination. So before I go on, so we're here to receive testimony on her confirmation hearing, and we did send out notices or invitation letters to the chairman of the board of directors, as well as the administrator who is here today. So if anybody's interested in providing any testimony, we were going to save the nominee for last. So if anybody else would like to come to the table to provide testimony, you're please welcome to do so. Okay, so so we'll start with the administrator. Good afternoon, and thank you for being here. Administrator Lastimosa.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Speaker Terlahi, Senator Brown, Senator Taitague, Senator Quinata. I'm Michelle Lastimosa, the Administrator for Guam EPA, and I'm happy to provide testimony in support of Mrs. Kathleen Moore-Linn. The Guam Environmental Protection Agency is pleased with Governor Leon Guerrero's nomination to appoint Mrs. Kathleen Moore-Linn to the Guam EPA Board of Directors, and Guam EPA is in full support of her nomination. I have some brief remarks about Ms. Moore-Linn that I'd like to share with you today. Mrs. Moore-Linn's professional background in leadership and service in our community is demonstrated by her long-standing career in executive management, education, and communications, a career which provides a favorable array of experience that will be to the benefit of our board. As you may already be aware, the present composition of our board features like-minded professionals hailing from the fields in engineering, law, education, environment, military, and business management, all sharing common interests that are supportive and protective of human and environmental health. As the Executive Director of the Research Corporation of the University of Guam, Mrs. Moore-Linn's roles and responsibilities are akin to some of our agency's operational schemes. Mrs. Moore-Linn is accountable to a board of her own, possesses administrative oversight on the grant activities and research functions performed by the Research Corporation, and through her leadership and oversight, she lends her expertise and vision to facilitate supporting the principles of island sustainability, coral reef resilience, resource conservation, emerging contaminants, and multicultural diversification in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We understand that under Mrs. Moore-Linn's administration, the Research Cooperation excels in fiduciary responsibility in producing clean audits and in its support for nearly 170 grants with over $37 million in annual budgets. Our most recent interaction with Mrs. Moore-Linn occurred this past February when we participated as government stakeholders to discuss the development of the Guam Aquaculture Innovation Center. Looking back at the discussions she led and the feedback she offered to other discussions, I can say with confidence that she will be supportive of the agency and its mission, especially in our efforts to enhance our relationship with the board, manage grants, and explore capacity building through research and public-private partnerships. She's an effective communicator, and her work with the Research Corporation suggests staunch advocacy for the community with the potential to prioritize community concerns and place those concerns at the forefront of board discussions. Thank you for this opportunity to share these thoughts with you all today, and we ask for your favorable consideration for Mrs. Moore-Linn's as we look forward to her confirmation. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Administrator. If you can stay for a while, we're going to have the nominee herself provide testimony at this time. Okay, so you're welcome to provide testimony. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you very much, Chair Perez and members of the committee. I appreciate you being here today and for allowing me a few minutes to tell members of the committee a little bit about myself as I'm under consideration to serve as a board member for the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. I moved with my family to Guam in 1976 when I was 14. My father, an attorney, successfully prosecuted a high-profile murder case on behalf of the government of Guam and was offered a job with a private law firm on island. He left the AG's office in Oregon, and we arrived in June, a few weeks after Typhoon Pamela. I attended Notre Dame High School for my sophomore and junior years of high school, and then finished high school in Oregon so I could attend Oregon State. I finished college at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and then returning home to Guam during the summers to work. And I returned to Guam for good in 1985 to work, be near my family, live, marry my husband of 37 years, Moore-Linn, and raise a family. I started my career at Guam Cable TV, where I worked for 5 years as the producer, writer, and host of Tropical Visions and various documentaries. In 1990, I was hired by the Guam Community College, where I worked for 12 years until I was hired by the University of Guam in 2002. I have worked at the University of Guam in various administrative positions for 22 years. For the last 11 of those years, I have served as the executive director of the Research Corporation of the University of Guam. I will retire in December of this year, and this allows me time to serve as a board member for the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. As executive director of RCOG, we went from supporting 0 grants in August of 2014 when we first launched to over $100 million of multi-year grants in 2024. RCOG grew from 2 employees in 2014 to 240 and achieved self-sufficiency as a public corporation within a public corporation. We established a travel award program and have sent over 100 UOG students to present and participate in conferences and in internships since 2017. RCOG built a culture of compliance and has never had a question cost on any grant transaction since its inception, which is foundational to UOG's clean audits. I understand what it takes to build and administer an organization. My experience in collaborating with teams to achieve significant milestones is best represented by the $12.8 million construction grant funding UOG received from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to build a new Water and Environmental Research Institute of the Western Pacific facility and water quality laboratory, as well as a nursing annex for the School of Health. As the project lead, I worked with administrators and faculty from WARI and the School of Health to obtain the funding and piece together the required match, and led the charge to satisfy 26 specific conditions required by the funding agency and numerous local requirements. I have learned what it takes to work through challenges to get to construction, which is currently underway for both buildings. This experience may come in handy as I understand GEPA plans to build a new laboratory facility. And I can certainly offer advice that may help streamline the process. If I'm confirmed, my job will be to review and approve budgets, policies, and other functions of the board. The organization itself is run by committed professionals who have a broad scope to manage and a seemingly endless task list. After reading about 2 years' worth of board meeting minutes, I must commend the team for their work, and yet there is more work to be done. 48 years ago, my family and I fell in love with Guam, its people and culture, the lifestyle, and the ocean environment. It is evident that the work GEPA performs to protect our natural resources directly contributes to sustaining and improving our quality of life today and for generations to come. Now, why should the committee confirm my nomination to the board? And I say that I count myself among the coalition of the willing, and the people who are willing to do the work it takes to improve our island and make decisions that have a lasting positive impact on our environment for all who call Guam home. And thank you, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Mrs. Usmasi, Cathleen, for your testimony and your acceptance of the nomination. Yeah, I think there are definitely in your testimony, there are definitely transferable skills to Guam EPA, and they're, I think, in the process of developing their own headquarters as well. So all of that skills that you have can definitely facilitate that. I guess the other thing that I, of course, am very interested in is the commitment to environmental protection. And I just maybe, I know there's a long list of mandates that Guam EPA has. And, you know, I know that's going to be, you're going to be working to understand a lot of that. And not only that, there are changes that are occurring nationwide. Recently, there's regulations that have been promulgated for open burn, open detonation, which took over 40 years to take place. And so I think, you know, understanding that, you know, with the experts that you have that are accessible to you and to the agency, I think that's really a critical thing to oversee as a board of director. Also, the PFAS. PFAS was a huge has been a huge change. You know, it's an emerging contaminant for quite some time. I think in 2016 was when we first heard that PFAS was detected in our water, and now it's a regulated contaminant in the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so I know you're going to have a steep learning curve in understanding these very technical issues. But I guess, you know, I think most important, you know, how do you, what is your vision? What do you see your role as, in addition to learning all of this, what do you think your vision is to, when you could, or your contribution to this board?
Well, I think foremost it is making sure that we protect the aquifer. That's foremost, because without our aquifer, what else it's going to destroy? If we ruin that, then it's our economy and everything else that goes with it. And I think that comes from working for years with the WARI folks at UOG and learning about all the things they do on Guam and in the region to as far as even hydrology and how the water flows through the karst aquifer, right? And where that water is coming out in Isuzu Cave and how much water flows out of there. How many wells we drill and making sure that, you know, the water belongs to the people, and making sure that it's clean and safe for everyone to enjoy. So I think that's, for me, a primary. There are so many things, I think, that certainly GIPA has under their very broad scope to deal with, including, I was reading in the minutes, the tire shredder, and where those shredded tires are then going to eventually end up. What do you do about all the junk vehicles and things that may be leaking from those junk vehicles or burned out vehicles on the sides of the roads, the dumping and so forth. And so I think really it is to do a lot of reading to understand the science and to come to decisions as a board to help support the direction of EPA, which also has, you know, links, right, to the nation and their mandates as well, and whatever other local laws are promulgated in support of keeping our environment clean. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I know when we first started, I think in the very beginning, when I first started becoming a senator, quorum was a big problem. And I think now it seems to be stabilized, and thanks to you for accepting this nomination, and upon, you know, confirmation that, you know, we hopefully can continue to have the quorum, because otherwise a notice of violations would go, you know, unenforced. So it's really critical. Do you have any conflicts of interest?
No. I'll be retiring in December. I will no longer be a government employee, and I do not plan to work full-time for anyone after I retire. So I think my life will be devoted to, you know, sitting on a couple boards, and Guahan Humanities is or Humanities Guahan is the other one. And so, along with the GIPA board, hopefully. And so that'll be my focus after December.
Okay, thanks. And sorry, I forgot to acknowledge Senator Brown. Thank you for being here today. So the other thing, I guess, is so it's clear that you are, one of the most important things is protecting our water, which I agree is so critical. And then you also mentioned about junk vehicles and recycling. I think that's one of the hurdles that we really need to see positive progress on. In regards to nuclear energy, nuclear power, yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are I am suspect of nuclear power, because if something goes wrong, then what's the plan? You know, it could possibly negatively affect the whole island. I prefer to see expanded solar energy production. And I know that there was recently a large grant that Center for Island Sustainability helped to write for the Guam Energy Office, and that was $60 million. And so that would go on, I believe low, economically disadvantaged folks in their homes, to relieve them of the power bill. So to me, that seems the way to go. I was not sold on the mobile nuclear-powered contraptions that I read about in the paper.
And then also, what is your view about zero waste, you know, the circular economy? Is that something that, you know, I guess Guam Pay does have mandates for zero waste projects and recycling. I guess with your contributions on the board, you know, how can we progress with that?
Well, I think every little bit helps. I think that Guam has taken some steps along the way to get there, but we have a long way to go to zero waste. But it can still be something that we're going to reach for and eventually achieve, to try and divert some of the waste from the landfill and put it to other uses is something that we do need to pursue. And so I would support any action that moves the needle on that specific issue, for sure. Because how much trash can we bury until we run out of space, or valleys, right? So we do need to take a look at that.
All right, thank you so much, Kathleen, and you know, thank you for accepting the nomination, and yeah, I look forward to your confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I'll go in order of who came. So Senator Taitague, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues, and most especially good afternoon to the nominee, and of course, Director, for being here. And it's always nice to have the Director support your nomination, so it's good she's here. But Kathleen, I've known you for many years. I was looking at some of the testimony that was brought in. Someone said, oh, I've known Kathleen Moore since 1985, and I was thinking, well, I've known her longer than that, you know.
It's true.
We go back a long time.
Yeah.
And very impressive resume that you have, and always contributing to the University of Guam with all your might and strength. I mean, you're always active. So I know when you put your mind to something, you know, it's 110% all the way. It's 1,000% that you'll put into it, and especially now that you won't have to work, it's even better knowing that. Now you're really involved, and that brings me to the part where you read, what, 2 years of board minutes and meetings? Usually I ask, you know, nominees, have you had an opportunity to read what you're getting into? And that's basically the minutes. And you have 2 years worth. So you're pretty much caught up in that perspective.
With the minutes, there's a lot to learn, yes.
There is. And did you find anything of interest when you were reading those 2 years of minutes that you thought you might be able to address?
I was really struck first and foremost by just the magnitude of what this agency is responsible for, right? Which is reflected in the minutes and the notices of violation and you know, tracking those and making sure that those are resolved and either the violators pay, which they should do, or, you know, what is the next step for that? So it is a lot. Those meetings are monthly, which is certainly, you know, a time commitment as well, but one I can undertake if confirmed. I think with the selection and appointment with the administrator, I think that's very helpful to run the organization, and she's no stranger to the organization, so I think that's good, and just moving forward on each of those tasks. And for sure, it's going to take me a while to read through I started, but didn't finish, all of the laws that relate to GIPA and everything that they oversee. So I don't think I can promise anyone any overnight fixes, but I certainly will be a committed member of the board and focus all of my efforts and due diligence on working through each of the issues that they have before them.
EPA is definitely a very important regulatory agency. Many of us, rely on, and to get the correct information. We've seen things slip through the cracks, like for instance, the whole thing at the cave, Marble Cave. That's right.
Yeah, right.
We all, in fact, the four of us here, the speaker and Sabina and myself and Joanne, we all went down there just to see what had happened. And for, none of our regulatory agencies to see what was happening and how it happened and why it happened, something fell through the cracks. So when it comes to environment, we can't afford for things like this to fall through the cracks because of the damage it'll cause. Long-term damage, not just this one. So I greatly appreciate your enthusiasm in looking into these regulatory areas and how we can strengthen it. I'm sure you're going to have a lot to offer there. Also, you mentioned, I'm pretending I can read without glasses. Okay. Yeah, be proactive. That's what I wrote. I wrote on here is I hope she becomes proactive, because they definitely need the help. They're very short-staffed. Senator Brown will probably bring more into that light, because she used to work at EPA and know how much it's not grown, Grants, very important. I know you have a lot of background in grants. I'm sure EPA is smiling year to year just knowing the fact that we have somebody who's very well versed in grants and can help fund EPA, what's needed. So other than that, I wish you the very best, and we've known each other forever. You can always call me. You have, I think, my cell number, so if there's anything I can do to help assist you in any way, please let me know, because anybody who's willing to, take the time out of their life and their family, away from their family, to be a part of making Guam a better place to live, then you have my support then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitague. Speaker Therese Terlahi, you're recognized.
Sujusmasi, Madam Chair, and Hafade, Cathleen, and Director, of course, Administrator. Thank you for being willing to serve on this board during your retirement. I appreciate that. I think that they'll be lucky to have you. I know, based on your, life and experience on Guam, that your concern for the aquifer, the marine waters, hopefully, is going to be evident in serving on this board and helpful. The board, as you said, does a lot of work. The agency is responsible for many, many, many things. We look to them for many things, and sometimes hope for more, but know that they're kind of maxed out as it is, and everything that we add to them is over and above what they're kind of set up to do at this point. But things are changing on Guam so fast; it's hard to keep up. But I do know. So one of the things that they do that's very evident is they have to do regulations. So they do new regulations for new things, or update the regulations constantly, I think. And that, to me, is a huge task, just to do the regulations itself. But this agency is also responsible for the enforcement of those things. And of course, there were times when I think we wished that the enforcement was more stringent. There's lots of people still calling and saying, what about this, what about that, dumping here. And so we've tried over the years to find ways to help them in enforcement, to share that duty of enforcement across, Guam, different agencies, different law enforcement. It's just a very difficult thing to do. So I think that when you serve on the board and you take a look at those things, that you can help, fresh ideas of how can we do this better for Guam. I worked at EPA, maybe that was my first job after college. And I remember at the time, they really very heavily relied on reports. Like if somebody reported something going wrong, that's what we investigated. But I think, maybe we can change that a little bit, like invite another way of enforcing these things. Like just keep training a lot of other agencies, the mayors and their staff, of what are violations and what should be reported more often. Keep reminding the public of, reporting, and really what are violations, right? I just think we can't get enough of it. It's, we do some rounds of, PR on it. These are new, we've got to do these things, but I just think since our biggest, I think the biggest effort we need is in enforcement, then we need a lot more eyes and ears. We really, really do. And then, it comes to the board, the enforcement of the agency comes to the board in this notice of violations, which I think they've done a great job of tracking. And now that has really been improved over the last few years. It's excellent. So, but I really think, we got caught off guard a while ago, kind of not tracking the NOVs, not really coming down on them so hard. We had to increase some penalties to make any kind of impact, but I just don't want to get caught off guard again. I want the board to be very active in, if they think these NOVs are not being enforced for some reason, or too lenient because of the laws that we have, I really think we have to have an active board in making recommendations, actually reporting to the public what's going on. I just think that's the biggest thing with EPA, because EPA, we should be a super environmentally conscious society, Guam, an island, we have an island. So we have to, our environment is everything. So I just think we just need to help everyone to enforce it more, and to know what EPA is going to do, what EPA's hands are tied from doing, so that we find another way to get that done. I just think we need your help a little bit to tell us, the storm drains are running into Tumon, and we can't stop them because of this. Let's come up with some ideas and let's stop them, because maybe the mandates don't necessarily require you to do that right now, but we need to find ways. So you guys, I know, have people out in the field. They might be reporting things that you can't enforce for some reason, but to help us to find a way to get those enforced, either through EPA or another agency, but make sure that all of these types of things are covered. I think storm drains is one of the things that has kind of gone back and forth. We've got rules and regulations, of course, but it just seems to be, to me, and we've got permitting procedures that they have to go through and requirements that they're supposed to comply with, but I just think that's one of the kind of obvious ones when you drive around Guam when it's raining, that you're going to see. I don't think that that's what's supposed to be happening with our stormwater. And so just those things, I just think it's a matter of, please, with your skills, especially, relations with the public, to me, that's what would help EPA. I mean, EPA has its own PIO, Public Information Officer, but I just think our entire community has to know everything about our environment. They really have to be equipped so that when they're walking around Tumon, they know this is not supposed to happen, right? Because right now it looks like this was permitted to work like this, and I just think Tumon's a very good example for me, because you know, we've made it into a preserve. We have prohibited our fishermen from getting fish out of there. I still see violations of those rules. However, we still see, I think, adverse impacts to the corals and the reefs that are man-made by our actions. And those should not happen. We're going through all this effort to prohibit the fishermen from fishing, yet we need to protect those areas to make them what they were intended to be, you know, the nurseries, so that they can fish elsewhere. The fish will be elsewhere. It's just getting harder and harder. So I don't know. They all work together, and I think your skills can add to this board's, you know, as you pointed out, they take care of the tires and the junk vehicles, everything. But altogether, I think we really need to kind of do a revamp of the community has to know what can and cannot be done in Guam, who's going to, besides EPA also, right, help to enforce those things, how to get it enforced, and just keep reminding them of that, and that we are enforcing. And I think the NOVs are also supposed to serve as a deterrent, right? And we just need to hear a lot more about them. That's what I would recommend, because, you know, punishing them with the fines and the penalties, in some cases we've seen not enough, right? It's not enough, the fine is not high enough to have a deterrent impact, but perhaps the publicity might be, right? And so just keep going back to that. I know sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. So I'm just saying, I don't know, those are my thoughts on watching EPA for a while. The hard work that they do just should be broadcast more. And it should be our work, you know? So all of us get tied into it. And I don't know, yeah, I'm just hoping that will happen as well. What are your thoughts on I know you talked about the aquifer, but the marine waters?
Well, even in my own lifetime here, the changes in Tumon Bay have been drastic with the bleaching. Some of that's beyond our control because it's global. So we really have to concentrate on those things that we can control. And so I think in terms of, so sometimes, you know, ideas start percolating and they might not be fully formed, but here I go. I'm thinking that a capstone course for the Masters of Public Administration or even criminal justice in terms of having them really have a laser focus on some of these things that you just mentioned. And in terms of enforcement, you know, what can be done. I know that for the Research Corporation, how we built our teams is we offered part-time employment, 20 hours a week, to seniors. And then they came in as seniors and they had a job and job experience in that. So when they graduated, they could go to a full-time job. Because often when you graduate from college, you don't have the experience to go with it. And so that has been really successful with us. And then beyond, you know, employees go and fly other places as well, which is great. I look at that as a silver lining. And then we just have a constant a funnel of new young folks coming in who are excited. You know, this is their first job. So I think there are ways that we can leverage some of those things to begin to address a couple of those issues. Yeah, I mean, I certainly have taken advantage of and have been blessed to do a lot of windsurfing. Every freckle is a moment of joy. So, you know, that's something that's very close to my heart as well. So the marine environment, absolutely, but everything on land goes down to our corals. So we have to look at it holistically.
Thank you. Yeah, I really believe the more we learn, the better we will be able to help EPA in these enforcement because, yeah, we will see the impact. So thank you again, and thank you to Director Lastimosa. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Speaker. Senator Quinata, if you have any questions.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for stepping up and serving the island community. This would be your first time as a board member? Thank you again. So good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon to all the individuals that are attending with us virtually. Really appreciate your guys' time. The environmental impact, Ms. Moore-Linn, with all the concerns about open detonation at the Anderson Air Force Base, what steps are you planning to take to make Guam EPA enforcement with the National Environmental Policy Act with those reviews, environmental impacts of OB and OD activities?
Well, I think that those open detonation and those burn pits, and I think in the Iraq War, right? I mean, didn't we have many instances of cancer coming to troops after that? So it's not just, okay, our local community, but it's their folks on the bases as well. So I think those need to be enforced. And if we don't have a public law in place for that, but I know that that's something that you were recently addressing, is that we have to come together as a community and make sure that those instances don't happen, because we don't need more health disparities on our island. We already have them. So to me, those open detonation and burn pits are just environmental disasters, period.
Thank you so much for that answer. Also, in community engagement and PR, do you support social media coverage and also trying to modernize the agency's digital footprint?
Well, I'm a boomer, so I'm probably not the best social media person, but you know, everybody has to use that, right? And so what we would do is find somebody within the organization who is kind of a digital native, basically, for that. But yeah, you can't have any outreach today without having a part of that as social media. But I would also combine that with traditional media, our newspapers, and of course our television news programming as well. So I think if you have all of those things combined, then you're going to reach a lot of people. Yeah, I do, 100%. Social media, yes.
Thank you so much, and yeah. I hope that we can also step up with our Region 9 informational graphics. What is your take on safer alternatives for open burning? I mean, never mind, disregard that. You already stated what you believe in. With the reports of toxic contamination released from specific strategies, what are some specific strategies that you would like to put in place with Guam residents, especially those living with some illegal dump sites on their property, right? They have illegal cars just piling up, battery waste sitting on their yards, also some discarded, building material?
Well, I think you would have to kind of go through that village to village, right? Because the mayors know as well where all these things are. And then have targets and communication with each of these homeowners or property owners to clean up and get rid of these dump sites or junk vehicles. And then it's kind of maybe on the other side of that, having some kind of positive recognition for those people who do clean up, so-and-so within the village, right? And so that you are not just always coming down on people, but you're recognizing them for changing behavior. And so that's how I would see it. Those things can be plotted. You can even plot them with drones, right? So have each of these dump sites per village, and so you know how many there are, and so then you target them, and then you just work methodically through them. I mean, I think that's where I would start.
Thank you for bringing that up. I'm very happy that you're also looking into drone surveys. That's very good. It's a good step forward, right? So I'm hopeful that EPA can look into that as well, and we can probably get a drone unit for EPA so that you guys can start surveying properties, and then you can go over your property data, right? So again, thank you so much for stepping up. I wish you all the best. If there's anything my office can do to support you in your initiatives, please let me know. Thank you so
Senator.
much.
Thank you, Senator Quinata. Senator Brown, if you have any questions.
Half a day, and thank you, Madam Chair. And I've known Cathleen Moore-Linn a long time, too. I don't know what this says about us, or the fact that you're even talking about retirement. How did that happen? It happened so fast. but you're a graduate of Notre Dame High School, check. You're also a graduate of my former alumni, the University of Hawaii at Manoa, so check, check. But I also appreciate the fact that with your background and your experience, coming to Guam EPA, I think is a tremendous asset to Guam EPA. For me, it is the job I enjoyed the absolute most. And it's been downhill ever since then, and hence I'm here back in the Guam legislature. The authorities of Guam EPA are quite significant, and yet my observation is I don't think the agency is as aggressive as it can be. You know, Senator Telo brought up the Marbo incident, and yes, you know, the speaker, myself, and our chair, Senator Sabina, went down there to look at the aftermath of the damage that happened. And you know, natural disasters do happen, but in that particular case, that's something that could have been avoided. And the response of the agency was not impressive. I mean, they said, oh, you know, we don't have enough personnel. Then my view is, if you don't have enough personnel, then stop permitting projects you can't properly oversee, because the damage to a natural resource in that particular case, Marbo Cave at the time, was really significant and could have been avoided. And it told me that the agency was not doing the level of inspection that it should have to minimize the amount of erosion damage that occurred there. And that to me is fundamental. I mean, if we had, you know, as we did back in the late 1980s, early 1990s, where we had so many hotels, golf courses, we had massive development on Guam. You remember all the cranes that were down in Tumon. The agency, I understand, has not grown much. It's pretty much the same size as when I was there 34 years ago. But we were able to maximize our presence because we actually followed through with our enforcement. And you knew that if you were going to take us on, go ahead. We will come after you. We will do enforcement. We'll do what we had. And we had some big players, some very high-powered attorneys that used to sit there and threaten us. And, you know, it's fine. You know, we have the law on our side. We give you the opportunity to address compliance, but if you don't, we will take action. And the ability to do that made us very effective. And I just think the agency needs to sharpen its teeth a bit and do proper enforcement, because if you don't, you're going to see those things happen. Recently, the legislature passed legislation with regards to the septic tanks that, you know, they claim are going to reduce the nitrates into our waterlands. And you mentioned, of course, your work and your engagement, and certainly your fondness of WERI. We share a mutual interest and fondness for WERI and the work that they do. But we're currently in a situation where we're already starting to see that the amount of nitrates and other contaminants in our waterlands is really pushing the limit of the Safe Drinking Water Act. Knowing that, you know, just weeks earlier, the Guam legislature had to address what was intended, I guess, to be up to a $500 million bond borrowing by the Guam Waterworks Authority, probably the largest bond they've ever borrowed. And on top of that, they're looking at trying to hopefully get another $300 million in grants, which goes over $800 million to try to remediate this potential, I can't even say potential, existing hazard that we already have in our waterlands. The Guam legislature, at least the majority of our colleagues that thought they had the wisdom, went ahead and improved it because they thought, oh, okay, we're going to do these properties up in northern Guam, we're going to allow them to subdivide it because these are, you know, being passed down from parents to their children, and so we're going to do that. And for me, knowing that these septic tanks may address reducing nitrates, they don't address the other contaminants that we're already starting to see in our waterlands. And Guam EPA came out and said, oh, no, we're good, we endorse it. WERI, surprisingly to me, came, oh, you know, we endorse it. And, you know, I just saw politics mingling in with that, and that was bothersome to me, because I go, if the test results are already showing we're at a level of concern, I'm kind of surprised the regulatory agency, and including WERI that we fund through the Hydrogeologic Survey every year, almost $500,000 with that and the monitoring, would find that acceptable. Even I had to step back and go, wait a minute, I don't, you know, I'm no scientist, but, you know, the numbers kind of show me otherwise. And that's where we're heading. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that, and how do you think and how do you see the agency can be strengthened, because I just don't see it. I mean, that fire that we had in Harmon, where all those hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cars, you can see when you go down the ramp there near the airport road, and you're going, how does that amount of junk cars be allowed to accumulate to those numbers? Odds are fairly good those vehicles are not sanitized. I'm sure they weren't. And they're down in Harmon. Who can't see it? Why didn't Guam EPA do something? Or maybe they said, oh, we gave a notice of violation. How many notices of violation? Did you take them to court? Did you do anything? Because let's say the business folds and they're not able to follow through with cleaning. Who's stuck with it? So that's a concern I have in terms of Guam EPA sharpening its teeth, so to speak, because it's not as effective and yet the demands on our natural resources are, as time goes on, is going to be greater. So I want to get your thoughts and your insight on that, and how do you think your contribution to the board can strengthen that?
I think you're correct in that litigation is the next step for these businesses that have notices of violation and they don't act, or there is no action. I am not sure of the timeline on those things. That's one of the items I think I'll learn as if I'm confirmed. And, you know, the steps to litigation, and attorneys willing to pursue that on behalf of the agency. So I think I agree that we have to, all of us, and I think this is what all of you have been saying today, it really is going to take a community effort moving forward, and to make sure that we protect what we have, every single one of us. And if that is sharpening our teeth or our pencils and going to court, at the end of the day, we are all going to benefit. Everybody's going to benefit from that. So I think we have seen more abandoned vehicles and more of those things. I mean, it's just more people, maybe more vehicles. And I think we would all like to see that reduced. Who wants to drive around and look at that? Not just an eyesore, but what it's leaking into the soil or into the aquifer if it's up north. So maybe taking a look at all of those things and prioritizing them, right? Of those notice of violations, who's been pending the longest, and what are we going to do? Let's take a look at those and pursue those, and go from there. I think because it's so wide, you're going to have to just prioritize, and then you go through methodically, and then, you know, they report to this body as to what has been accomplished in terms of those areas that just seem really egregious, like you're talking about with the vehicles, or the pile of burning tires.
No, and
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's something we want to see. And as our colleague mentioned about, you know, now you have the benefit of drones, the technology of drones. I mean, we used to have to get up in a helicopter several times a year and go over the island to see if there were sites that, you know, there were violations, because otherwise some of these properties were not directly visible or accessible. So certainly the opportunities that you have to use technology to assist you in your mission, I think would be a wonderful idea.
I think we can get some grants for that.
That would be good. I mean, you have to check with the FAA or something to get clearance, but it would be wonderful to ensure that that capability is there. But I'm sure with what you know and your history, you'll be a tremendous asset to the board. But we want to see that. I want to see Guam EPA gear up, because it's a very powerful agency. A lot of people don't realize the power Guam EPA has. I mean, it can shut a lot of things down, and we got in the business of doing that in spite of the politics of who knew who and who knew who on the Hill. If they were in violation of the law, I know no public official would come out and endorse it, you know. So it gave me a lot of latitude in working there and with our board to address proper enforcement, because in the end, we all suffer as a community if we don't do that. So good luck to you. I'm sure you'll be confirmed, and welcome to your new adventure of your retirement, and enjoying life a little more. I think the rest of us have to catch up with you. So thank you very much, Cathleen Moore-Linn, for your service to our people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle, for being here as well.
Thank you, Senator Brown. And is there anyone who would like to provide testimony before we close the hearing? Okay. So again, I would like to congratulate you on your nomination, and we look forward to a swift confirmation. And thank you. We're looking forward to your service. So if there are no further testimony or comments on the executive appointment of Cathleen Moore-Linn to serve as a member of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board of Directors, this confirmation hearing has been duly heard. Suduas Masi. Thank you. Okay, next we would like to, the committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m., September 12th. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning. It can be dropped off at the mailboxes of the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. Okay, at this time, we would like to call up those that want to testify on the next item of the agenda, which is Bill 328-37 COR. sponsored by Senator Roy A.B. Quinata, co-sponsored by Senators Dwayne T.D. Nicolas and Vice Speaker Tina Rose Mooney Barnes. It's an act to amend Section 5707A of Article 12, Chapter 5, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated, and to amend Section 1913C of Chapter 19, Title 1, Guam Code Annotated, relative to the procedure for judicial review of decisions made by the Public Auditor in procurement appeals and related matters. I'd like to offer the floor to the sponsor of the bill for any introduction. Senator Roy Quinata, you're recognized.
Hafide, thank you, Madam Chair, for conducting this public hearing on Bill 328-37. As the author of this legislation, I am very much pleased to open discussion on this issue and affecting our procurement process and the efficient operation of the OPA office. This bill seeks to address the current challenges faced by the agency when a party seeks judicial review of the OPA decision in its procurement appeals. As it stands, the OPA stands at risk of being burdened with civil actions that divert valuable resources away from the primary mission of the OPA office. This legislation aims to clarify and streamline the judicial review process, aligning it more closely with the procedures for administrative decisions under the Guam law. By doing so, we ensure fairness and efficiency in the procurement appeals process. I look forward to receiving testimony from the OPA Director, DOA, and I believe some colleagues as well. Thank you, ma'am.
All right, thank you, Senator Quinata. So we did receive a fiscal note, and it highlights that that over the past 3 years, the public auditor has reported between $15,000 and $20,000 per year expended on just a few appeals on OPA procurement decisions. According to the OPA, the cost would have been higher had the OPA not recused itself from a high-profile procurement appeal that has been litigated for the past 12 years. And it further states that given the administrative nature of the proposed legislation, the Bureau recognizes the benefits of the proposed legislation to include potential cost containment afforded to the OPA. So we did send out invitation letters to the Public Auditor and Director Byrne, who are both here today, to provide testimony. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Public Auditor B.J. Cruz for his testimony. Thank you for being here.
Madam Chair, I thank you for recognizing me first, but I know that Mr. Byrne has spent the last month here, and so he's been gracious about wanting to come over and testify, and with your permission, can I yield to him so that he can go back? He has some other things to take care of.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that. Director Byrne, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, sir, for that consideration. Thank you for permitting me to present the position of the Department of Administration on Bill 32837. DOA supports this bill and its intent to bring clarity to the procurement process, in particular the role of the public auditor in the process of ensuring that GovGuam procurement actions are fair and bring value to the government. It is clearly anomalous that the public auditor should be considered a defendant in a suit when he is carrying out his duty to determine the validity of an appeal. To operate effectively, all elements of the procurement process should work well. The role of the public auditor is critical to our procurement system. Not all jurisdictions have this level of review, and judicial reviews are generally designed to oversee the actions of government bodies. I do believe, however, that in our case, it is appropriate for this standard of review to be the legal requirement. DOA has also reviewed the bill changes to Section 1913C of Title I GCA. In concurring, it would wish to point out that paragraph C, this is a textual comment, should end at the semicolon, since the following words mandating the action the public auditor may take applies to paragraphs A, B, and C. Thank you for allowing me to present DOA's testimony on Bill 328.
All right, thank you, Director Byrne. So you're in support of this in its totality?
Yes, Madam Chairman.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Are you able to stay for questions, or you have to go?
If you would excuse me, I would appreciate it.
Yeah, or can we ask questions of you at this time?
Sure, sure.
Okay. Yeah, so the question I have, you said standard of review. So can you explain what effect that would have, this bill would have, what effect would it have on the standard of review of the courts, if I'm hearing you correctly?
Well, what I was referring to is I was comparing our process with some other jurisdictions that don't have this review between the operating agencies and the judicial system. Our system works well, I think, because we do have this standard review within our system, and it prevents the courts getting clogged up, but it also ensures that the process works as it's intended.
Okay, yeah, because I'm not sure if you're referring to, so the de novo process, is that what you're referring to versus a substantive review process? Is that what you're referring to?
Well, I was really just making a comparison between what we do here and what other jurisdictions do within their own processes, and they don't all have this administrative review that we do have here. And I was just concerned to make sure that neither the courts not get clogged up, nor the administrative review level that the public auditor provides for us gets clogged up also. You know, it's very important that when we do get a challenge to a procurement, that we deal with it as quickly as possible, because a procurement that's stalled is a procurement that isn't provided to the agency and to the public.
Okay, all right, thank you. And you don't have any written testimony that we can disseminate at this time, but, or do you?
I will have this presented in written form.
Okay, great. I would open the floor to my colleagues for any questions. Senator Quinata, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Nothing at this time.
Speaker Terlahi.
Yes, Mr. Burke, can you just repeat your recommendation regarding the semicolon and subsection C?
Yes, and I'll make sure that it's clear in the written version of this. But the paragraph C runs on, and the wording that's attached to the end really does apply to both paragraphs A and B. So I was suggesting that you stop there and then restart a paragraph at the semicolon.
All right, yeah, so after provided explanation, there should be a period and take the rest and put it either up on the top or somewhere else. Okay, I get it. All right, thank you. And so do you think it's going to make a difference to change the words from an action to a petition in this paragraph?
Yes.
Okay, and all right, have we been impacted? I guess I could ask the auditor this, but all right then, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Taitague.
Thank you, and thank you for being here this afternoon. I did have a question too, like Speaker, with regards to an action versus a petition. Can you tell me the difference between the two? Oh, you'll speak on that? Okay. Okay, then I have no other questions. Thank you, Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Senator Taitague.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Senator.
much, Director, for being here. Yeah. And your testimony. Okay, so at this time, we'll recognize Public Auditor B.J. Cruz.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Madam Chairman and esteemed members of this committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on Bill 328-37. The Guam Office of Public Accountability supports this bill as it intends to clarify judicial review of OPA decisions on procurement appeal and help the OPA to be more efficient. I want to especially thank Senator Quinata, our oversight chair, for introducing the legislation. I should be upfront at this point. The legislation was prepared by my legal counsel, Mr. Mitch Thompson, who's not here today, so I'll read his testimony into the record as my testimony for today. But also, I probably should also be upfront about the fact that Section 2 and Section 3, you may find it to be non-germane, and if you want to split it, I would have no objection to that, and make it a separate bill. And when I'm done with my testimony, I'll explain the reason for that. But I just wanted to again, thank Senator Roy, but apologize for not having separated it into two separate bills, and it was just put into one bill. But just so there's no challenge to its germaneness, I'm being upfront about it and just saying I can see that it could be found to be non-germane, and if you want to split it. Okay? I will now read excerpts from OPA Legal Counsel Mitchell Thompson's written testimony, who, along with our other legal counsel, Joseph McDonald, who's here with us today, helped draft the bill provided to this committee. Currently, when a party seeks judicial review of the decision of the OPA in a procurement appeal matter, the OPA is named as a defendant in a civil action in the Superior Court. The judicial review process for such OPA decisions is treated like a regular civil action between parties suing for money damages, property rights, etc. This is different from the procedure followed for judicial review of administrative decisions under Guam law. And this different procedure forces the OPA to divert resources to respond to the civil action, which could instead be put to more productive uses. I believe that this unfortunate situation can be remedied by the amendment to the procurement law as set forth in Section Bill 328-37, the legal background. Guam adopted the ABA model procurement in 1979 and in 1982. At that time, Guam did not adopt Chapter 12 of the Model Procurement Code, which sets the framework for administrative board to hear procurement appeals and the judicial review thereof. In 1986, the legislature added a new Chapter 12 to the Guam Procurement Law, modeled after the Model Procurement Code, which provided for procurement appeals to be decided by Procurement Appeals Board, Public Law 18-44. In 2005, this law was revised to have the OPA, rather than the non-existent Procurement Appeals Board, resolve procurement appeals in Public Law 28-068, Section 4, subsection 5. In Townhouse versus Department Store versus Department of Education, Townhouse, seeking judicial review of a procurement appeal decision by the OPA, filed a special proceeding which named neither the procuring agency nor the OPA as defendants. In the Townhouse decision, the Supreme Court held that a party seeking such judicial review must instead file a civil action which names either the territory of Guam or the relevant agency or government entity from which it seeks review as defendant. The Supreme Court concluded naming a government agency is a requirement to waive the government's sovereign immunity, and that failure to name DOE or other government agency as a defendant resulted in sovereign immunity barring the appeal. The Supreme Court later set out some detail the procedures to be followed by the Superior Court in judicial review of procurement appeals in an OPA procurement appeal, Teleguam Holdings versus Territory of Guam. In Teleguam, a complaint seeks judicial review OPA procurement appeal decision had named the defendant the Territory of Guam, the Department of Administration, GSA, and the OPA. The Supreme Court held that a complaint seeking such judicial review should name and be served upon all relevant defendants. The Supreme Court then noted that Teleguam had complied with such requirement. The current practice, the Supreme Court has noted that even absent express statutory authority, the courts of Guam have common law authority to review administrative agency decisions, and that was in Gutierrez versus Guam Election Commission. The procedure for judicial review and administrative decisions set out in the Administrative Adjudication Act generally controls. Under this procedure, the parties seeking judicial review of an administrative decision files a petition for a writ of mandate against the agency, not a regular civil action. For certain agencies, such as the Civil Service Commission, a petition for judicial review must be filed, as in Ray Carlson versus Perez. However, the Supreme Court of Guam has determined that judicial review of OPA determinations or procurement appeals must be filed as a civil action based on the current language of 5 GCA Section 5707. This requires the OPA to be named as a defendant, and the Superior Court generally permits the parties to conduct discovery through deposition, interrogatories, and document requests, which is contrary to the practice in judicial review of other administrative actions. Section 5707 is modeled after Section 9-5-10 of the Model Procurement Code. Section 5707 authorizes an appeal of an OPA decision in a procurement appeal in the Superior Court as provided in Article D of Chapter 9 of the chapter. Interestingly enough, that section does not include a similar phrase. Instead, Section 9 merely states that the appeal may be made to a designated courts. Other jurisdictions with adopted the MPC, Model Procurement Code, tend to follow the model of Section 99-510F, 1 of the Model Procurement Code by merely stating that judicial review may be had and designate the court with which it may be sought. Administrative decisions may be appealed to the Superior Court in accordance with the Alaska Rules of Administrative Procedure. That's in the case up there. In Hawaii, the Hawaii Circuit Court, where it arose. Section 5480 is included as a part of Section D of Chapter 9 of Guam Procurement Law, and is modeled after 9-4001 of the Model Procurement Code. Section 58480 states that the Superior Court has jurisdiction over actions between the territory and an actual or prospective bidder, offerer, or contractor related to procurement issues. Section 5480 does not expressly provide that the OPA should be named as a defendant in the civil action, nor does it provide the discovery would generally be permitted. Instead, 5480 merely states that the Superior Court has jurisdiction over procurement appeals brought by interested parties. Section 5707 expressly authorizes judicial review of the Superior Court by the Superior Court of such OPA decisions. It's standard practice in seeking judicial review of other Guam administrative actions to name the agency as a respondent, but it is not standard practice to require that the agency be named as a defendant in a civil action, nor to permit discovery in such matters. Section 5707 as written should not be read to require deviation from that standard practice. Based on the foregoing, it is respectfully submitted that the legislature should not have referenced Section D of Chapter 9, instead, which includes Section 5480, when adopting Section 5707 in 1982. Section 5480 should not have been used to provide the procedure for judicial review of OPA decisions. Other jurisdictions with adopted the MPC have not incorporated their version of Section 9-401 into the separate statutes. The recommendation. Based on the foregoing, it is recommended that the legislature enact Bill 328-37, which should amend Section 5707 to delete the reference to Article D of Chapter 9 and instead provide judicial review is initiated by filing petition for judicial review in the Superior Court of Guam. To clarify the, end of quote, to clarify the procedure for judicial review of an OPA decision on a procurement appeal. This amendment should eliminate having the OPA being named as a defendant in the civil action and expose the OPA to unnecessary and unwarranted litigation expense and discovery requirements, and should bring judicial review of OPA decisions in line with judicial review of other Guam administrative decisions. We thank you for your consideration. In plain English, what we're trying to do with this legislation is to make sure that when we go up, when someone appeals a procurement appeal of the OPA, it goes to the court, it goes to the Superior Court like other administrative decisions of other administrative agencies. Like if EPA was to make an administrative hearing, a decision, it would go to the Superior Court on appeal with a judicial review of the decision of the EPA board or the Civil Service Board. The way that the Guam law was written for procurement appeals, it left it vague enough so that the Supreme Court decided it should be a civil action, and you had to name us as a defendant. As a result, we've had to hire counsel, answer the complaint, file motions, file briefs, and it's just an expense that is unnecessary. When it goes up on appeal, like if one of my decisions when I was a judge was taken up on appeal to the Supreme Court, I did not have to hire an attorney to defend my decision as it went up. The decision went up on appeal, and the prevailing parties was the one that defended the decision, and did not necessitate my having to come up as a judge or my attorney to go up as a judge to defend my decision before the Supreme Court. In the same way, what we're proposing with this is to just make this go over as an appeal, as a judicial review, without naming the OPA as a defendant, without having the OPA subject to depositions and having to hire counsel to answer the complaint, to file motions, and to defend motions that are being, and then to defend the action when it's being argued in court. The prevailing party should be the one that does that. They're the ones that have an interest in the decision. The OPA really should not have an interest in the decision. It made a decision, and that's what should go forward, and we don't have to go up and spend that money. I want to thank my legal counsels, because this really was a recommendation against their own financial interest. Not that they make that much money from us, because they charge very little, but the thing is that they just felt that it was unnecessary for them to be charging the OPA to go to court for actions. Yes, we should pay them if they have administrative hearings that they have to preside on or assist us in something at the office. But to go to court to try to defend a decision, they didn't feel that it was necessary, that it really should have been that way. And there is a current case that was just heard this week, the 11th year of the DFS case. If Doris had not recused herself in the beginning of that case, and she had made a decision, and that had gone to the Superior Court, we would have had to have had an attorney in the DFS case for the last 11 years, billing the office for the last 11 years, to answer all the motions and be in attendance at all those hearings to defend the decision. But the thing was that it should just be a judicial review, and let the prevailing parties and the parties of interest be the ones that take it up on appeal and leave the OPA out of it without us being included as a defendant. I hope I'm clear.
All right, thank you, Public Auditor. Is that
And the reason why I'm separating, why I'm suggesting that the Section C as a non-germane be separated is when I asked legal counsel to prepare legislation, I had remembered that many of you had been asking at previous hearings, how do you enforce your findings and your recommendations? And so they wrote Section 3 in this bill that has a writ of mandate to the Superior Court to enforce the action. That should be a separate bill. That should be a separate bill and a separate hearing. I don't think that the two of them should be in the same bill for fear that people would have problems with one or the other. And both of them should stand on their own. And I hope both of them will survive separately. But as it relates to subsection for Section 3 on the mandate, that was written at the request of many of the members of the legislature, asking us to, how do we enforce it? And we just, I believe our testimony at the time was, we try to do follow-ups. Our standard operating procedure is 6 months after a procurement, a performance audit is released. We do a follow-up. And then sometimes 3 or 4 years later, we'll do another follow-up. But we had there was no requirement we couldn't force them to do anything about it. And so this subsection 3 is our recommendation on how you can give us the authority to go to court, to file a writ of mandate, to force the agencies to comply with the recommendations that we make. But that's a whole other issue from the civil action, procurement appeal, judicial review issue. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Public Auditor. Does anyone else would like to testify from OPA? Okay. So, so again, so the change that you're requesting that the bill would do, so currently, correct me if I'm wrong, when an action goes to court, basically is a lawsuit is filed, right? And that's what, and the public
complaint is filed, yes.
Yeah, a lawsuit is filed, and the public auditor is, if it's an appeal, like if they're appealing a decision by the public auditor, and they follow through with the judicial action, it's a lawsuit basically. And what this does, this Section A does, it does away with the waiver of sovereign immunity, right? Is that correct?
The sovereign immunity is still, will be waived because the agency is still involved, but the OPA is not involved. Say the appeal, the procurement appeal is construction company versus DPW. If for some reason the OPA decided the decision in favor of DPW, construction company could go to the Superior Court to appeal that decision. That decision, that when it goes when it's filed in the Superior Court of Guam, it's filed as construction company versus the Guam OPA and DPW. But the OPA is still included in there. The way it should go up is just construction company versus DPW. And then the government would defend the decision of the OPA against the construction company when it goes up. But if it's not, if like we have this one case that's now in the Supreme Court, S&H versus Basel, they're both catering companies, and they have huge million-dollar contracts. In the case when it was brought before us, it was Basel versus S&H. When it goes to the Superior Court for appeal, it reads Basel versus the OPA. And the decision of the Superior Court, which was in favor of the OPA in that case, is now before the Supreme Court. And Mr. McDonald just spent all of last month writing a brief to defend the decision of the Superior Court decision, supporting and affirming our decision, when it should have been just S&H should have been the one that fought to save the case, not my counsel.
Okay, so it doesn't affect the waiver of sovereign immunity, so.
No.
Okay. And then regarding, so I guess we'll definitely double check this as well on our end to make sure that, you know, there's no unintended consequences of this, you know, regarding the waiver of sovereign immunity to proceed in the judicial courts. Maybe Attorney McDonald, if you have anything to add to this?
Thank you. I guess the best way to think about it is this way. When a matter gets decided at the OPA, the facts, all the evidence, everything that was used to make the decision, it's now been crystallized. And what is normally decided is that decision based off of standards in the law. But what has happened is that because the interpretation that we were talking about in the Telo, Guam and the townhouse cases, the Supreme Court decided that that would mean an actual action, civil action. So what's going up now is potentially a reopening of the facts that should have been decided at the OPA's level, in addition to motion practice, discovery, and all of those things. So it adds a whole different layer, potentially, of procedures that you don't normally have in a petition for judicial review. And the reason why that's important is the only thing that should be going up is the decision itself, not the parties, definitely not, you know, as the public auditor was saying, definitely not like if the court gets appealed, its decision gets appealed, the court doesn't also go to the Supreme Court to defend its decision. So that's kind of the way we need to think about it, is that the way it's set up now is potentially there could be new facts, and you have the court itself being dragged up into an appeal. In this place, it's the public auditor. Now, you'd asked about specifically.
So right now, there's for this particular court action, there has to be a waiver of sovereign immunity.
Okay, so.
Right, so I'm just wondering, does this affect the waiver of sovereign immunity by removing this Article D? It says Chapter 9, but I think they meant it should have been Article 9, Subarticle D, right? So that part is about waiver of sovereign immunity. So I'm just wondering, by crossing that out, are you also impacting the waiver of sovereign immunity for DPW, for instance?
No. No.
Okay.
No. It's only reducing it. Again, the idea of the waiver of the sovereign immunity should be taken to the side about when there's money at stake in this procurement and you want to bring it to court. So that's really what that's all about, and how you get it done is through an express waiver of sovereign immunity. And in the sovereign immunity section, if memory serves me correct, it only says that the Superior Court has jurisdiction over these appeals. So it still leaves open the question of, you know, whether the OPA is actually waiving sovereign immunity from our perspective. Now, I haven't totally analyzed it from the agency's perspective, but the fact that they have an actual procedure, I would imagine the Supreme Court would say that's the waiver of sovereign immunity. There's an actual procedure to get into court. Okay. Usually you like text that says, we hereby waive sovereign immunity on behalf of this type of action against this agency. That's the way you really want it to say it. But what they're just saying now is that the Supreme Court, so it doesn't even have the actual waiver language if you were to look at it. So they had to come at it in a different way. Okay. I'm getting too much into the weeds for you, but really the sovereign immunity idea should probably be taken to the side, and it's just what we're really talking about is the process by which the decision gets reviewed at the Superior Court is not as a complaint, because that opens up a whole can of worms that, you know, lawyers would really like to get into because it makes no sense, so we'd probably go in there and try to make some sense of it, if you know what I mean. Or a petition for judicial review, which is there's a pattern for this. There's no discovery. There's a standard for review, right? It's usually substantial evidence or something like that. And that's really set, and it's not, and if you think about it that way, in a civil action, the standards are preponderance of the evidence to prove your case. But in a petition for judicial review, oftentimes it's just substantial evidence. So there's even that kind of thing going on where when we decided this was going to be a civil action, a lot of different things happened that we probably didn't know where they would all end up. But if we bring it back to where it should be, which is how you properly review administrative decisions, which is judicial review, and you stick to the standards that the court's has developed under judicial review, you don't get all these sort of you know, different results that you wouldn't normally get by putting a civil action over it. So what we're trying to do is just say, let's just go back to where it should actually be a judicial review.
Okay. So from my understanding, there isn't a definition of judicial review. So I think this is really a critical issue because, you know, there's a discovery process, which the OPA has full power, right? It's called de novo, right? De novo process where you can bring forward the facts. And then, you know, from my understanding, judicial action on judicial review of administrative decisions, generally they pay a lot of deference to what's decided in the administrative process. And so I'm just wondering, would that change by this bill? Would it affect, would it put it more on would it weight it more towards deferential review versus I guess there's a spectrum, right? You can have de novo all the way to deferential. So would that impact the way the courts review these cases?
The short answer is no, because there's specific statutory provisions in the procurement law on the review, on how you would actually review the public auditor's decision. He's entitled to great deference, right? And there's types of errors that he would have to commit. So that's still already in there. And that's actually how they would review it. But if you think about going to trial, you just decided this, now you're going to trial again, and you have to prove by preponderance of the evidence when it's really a substantial evidence standard under petition for judicial review. These are the types of different, like, you know, crazy results that could happen if enterprising lawyers wanted to, you know, sort of figure this all out. But all we're saying is, instead of trying to figure out what all of that means, that we've decided it would be a civil action, let's just call it judicial review. So its impact on sovereign immunity, you know, probably negligible, if anything. It's the same thing. We're talking about money. You're talking about paying people back, or excuse me, you're talking about money at the end of the day, or some, you know, some sort of different result in the procurement. You're really, what you're trying not to do is reopen it, which is kind of what you are able to do as a civil action, versus a petition for judicial review when it's, like I said, the evidence is crystallized. It's already there. There's no picking at it. Now the sides just argue about what it means. The way it's set up now is that we're going to pick at it, but we potentially can do different things with it, including with, you know, although parties haven't pushed it too far, trying to get some more evidence or that kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah, there are other parts in the procurement law that state it does carve out determinations, not all determinations, by the Chief Procurement Officer, Director of Public Works. They do basically say the finality of administrative determinations. They did a carve out. They didn't include all of them. So I think that's questionable. to me, that's a question. You know, how does it impact a judicial review process? And you're saying it doesn't at this point.
The standards of review and the statute are still there, and they will always be there, right? So I don't think that's going to be affected in any way. All we're saying is, instead of filing something that says complaint and naming the public auditor as defendant, you're filing a petition and you're not naming the public auditor as defendant, but you're naming the agency as the respondent. And so they have to respond to that petition. The public auditor's out of it. You guys fight over whatever the public auditor just decided. That's really what it's about. It's normally, same thing with the CSC. It's the agency that did the action and the employee, but the CSC doesn't go up and say, you know, let me explain what we did, and oh, do you guys want to do some discovery and try to figure out what else happened in this case? Because it's supposed to be crystallized as of the OPA's order. That's what I'm trying to, carry across. The civil action allows you to go beyond that.
Yeah, I mean, I understand. I like the analogy.
And the reason why I hate to talk, people say you don't talk things into existence. One of my big fears is, in a civil action, there's possibility for deposition and interrogatories, all right? Right now, the way that it goes up on a judicial review, the record, the complete record, everything that is in our files, our tape recordings, of the hearing, our transcript of the hearing, all go to the court. And Jarek and I have to review he has to go through every page of it. And then I certify that we've gone through every page of it. A civil action, if an attorney wanted to, could depose me to ask me how I made that decision. Not just what I wrote, but could depose me to ask me how I came to that decision. And I don't think that should be part of what goes up. What goes up should just be the record on appeal. You look at the decision, the court makes a decision on whether or not I was capricious in making my decision, but not to have anyone depose me or send me interrogatories. Why did you say this? Why did you do that in your decision? And worse yet, the one thing that when I first realized that I was being named as the defendant, I was trying to figure out, how about if one of them decided to ask as a remedy monetary damages for the loss? Because I made a decision and they lost money. And I'm like, do we have insurance in the office to protect me against this kind of thing? And so it should just go up as a decision made by the OPA, and the record on appeal is what is appealed, without having depositions, interrogatories, or any kind of discovery.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And also the analogy you made with the courts, right? You don't have the judges that made the decision being deposed and have to answer for the decision that was made. So, yeah, I do appreciate that. So I think those are my questions for now, and I'd like to open it up to my colleagues. Senator Quinata, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The speaker already answered all the questions that I was going to ask him, so I have nothing further. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Quinata. Senator Taitague.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see the dilemma, PG, that you're in, a public auditor, especially on that last explanation. Your decision in order is enough to suffice, and would probably provide those documents in the court in the event they go to appeal. So it does make sense. My concern is, again, you said you explain, I really didn't quite understand Section 3 on what's the difference between a motion and a petition. Maybe I wasn't listening at that point, but can you please, again, explain the difference between a motion?
No, well, no, between a complaint and a
A motion and a, yeah.
And
Action,
a-
I'm sorry, not a motion, I'm sorry, I'm still in motions. Okay, an action and a petition, I'm sorry.
the way the Supreme Court interpreted action in the both the townhouse and the Telegram case was that it was a civil action. The law doesn't say civil action, it just says it shall go to it goes to the Superior Court. Unfortunately, because it wasn't clear, they decided that it should be a civil action, naming the office as a defendant. And the only way that the Superior Court can change that, or anybody can change that, is that it be done here. Because the Supreme Court's not going to change its decisions in Telegram and in Townhouse, that it interpreted action to mean a complaint, naming
So a petition is basically just the request?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's the difference.
yeah.
It's one that acts upon it, and the petition is just a request.
Yes.
So it's very, okay.
And
this would,
if you look at Section 3,
right.
where how to enforce our decisions, we make it a writ of mandate.
Mm-hmm.
That's a petition, a writ to the court, asking the court to force an agency to do something.
Right, and with the writ of mandate.
We want a writ of review to the Superior Court, not a complaint to the Superior Court.
So a petition for a writ of mandate is is asking that it be answered through a petition, right? It's because the way I'm reading here, give me one moment.
See, the problem that I'm having, with the problem we have with the two different, with Section 2 and Section 3, that's the reason why I wanted to kind of separate them. Let's just do Section 2.
So I'm not sure which public hearing we're going to have next. You know, if we were to separate the two because of the germaneness, you know, on Section 2 and Section 3 and have two different bills, is that your recommendation? So that we don't come into issues on germane. I understand that. So we would assume, are we speaking on Section 2 so that we've already called that bill, and then
we'll just
Section
leave it as
3 would be a separate bill by itself, and we'd have another
So I
public hearing?
think it's dependent on the author, if he would like to, I mean, maybe we could still have.
Can I just clarify? So Section 2, with regards to appeals and reviews of public decisions, that's with regards to procurement appeals. In 1913, where Section 3 is, that has to do with the public auditor audits. So there are two different functions of the office, but in the end, the decisions in appeal, we issue decisions in appeals, and the office issues audits. And so that's the distinction between the two sections. Okay.
So I think at this point, without having a decision made by the author, maybe we can continue with hearing on this Section 1913 is.
So we're hearing both. We're asking questions for both sections then?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
that was my question. Okay, so that's how we're going to play this then. Whatever happens in committee will probably come out two different legislations and addressed at the same time, because I do see Article 12, Procurement Appeals, is under the section of 2. And then you have to go further down to Title 1, which is totally different. I understand that. Okay, so now that I figure out what actions and petitions and the writ of mandate to force implementation would be by the public auditor? You would be submitting? Okay, so the public auditor would be the one to file the writ of mandate.
Senator, I make that suggestion in Section 3 only because many of you have asked me at previous hearings, how do you enforce the recommendations?
Right.
And I'm suggesting that if you want to give the office the power to file writ of mandates to force the agencies to comply with our recommendations, then it would be it pass Section 3 separately in a different bill.
Well, I don't know if it forces the court to, have to see. What we're doing right here is just taking you out of the mix, of the, if someone wants to appeal the case on your decision and wants to appeal it, we're just taking you out of the mix of it. That's all that we're doing here.
For 2.
Yeah, right.
And for
And
three,
whether
it's
they,
putting me back in, it's putting me
Yeah.
back into an action, to
Right.
file an action
right.
as a writ of mandate.
Yeah,
Separate.
no, I understand, but I just, I understand also how you want to be taken out. You've done your job, the office did their job, and now they don't, the appeals go on. The question I do have is that in the event that, okay, this bill does pass, you're out of the equation, they do go to court, they file this into court between John Doe and DPW, okay? And once that's heard in the court, in the event they're not satisfied with that, they can appeal again, right, to the Supreme Court, correct? So nothing stops that, and you won't be involved again on that. Okay, so that explains it. So filing petition for judicial review. Well, I'm hoping the speaker, as an attorney, can speak more on that section, which I think she will. But other than that, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Taitague. Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Sujusmasi, Madam Chair, and thank you, Public Auditor, and of course, Director Byrne, and to Attorney McDonald and Mr. Hernandez from the Public Auditor's Office, right? Thank you all for being here, and I think your original testimony made it very clear, so I was confused too until I heard the testimony, and so now I'm actually very supportive. So for the first, for section 2 of the bill, we're going to change your current mandate, which is you must file a complaint, a civil complaint in order, or a party, either a party who received the adverse decision or the government who received the adverse decision, if they want to appeal, must file a civil complaint for judicial review. And with a civil complaint, it allows for discovery. The standard that the courts are going to make their decision by would be different than a regular petition for judicial review. And the who is named as a defendant versus just a respondent, that also changes. And so we want to change this and make it similar to other administrative proceedings like the civil service, where they come in and they don't have to file a whole new complaint. They file a petition for judicial review of their decision and their record, and just like a package, just like you described. And so that's really, I have no objection to doing that. That we should do. So that would, that makes a lot of sense. So the courts then would review it, and so you would save money by, you're not being named as a defendant, so you don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to hire a lawyer to defend yourself. And you can opt whether to even be represented in that at all, because the two parties, the party who won and the party who didn't, I guess, they would be represented. They would naturally want to represent themselves in there, and you can let them battle it out. You've already put in writing your entire decision and the reasons and the findings and everything, and the whole record is there. All right, so that makes sense. And is, in addition to civil service, is there any other agency or procedure that does this, that does a petition for judicial review in administrative cases? If not.
Not that I know of, but I think the medical license board might have.
Yeah, I'm wondering if they,
yeah,
or
if the decision is against a doctor getting licensed here, they can petition to the court.
So their appeals are filed as a petition for judicial review as opposed to a civil complaint, medical licensing board versus someone else, or doctor so-and-so versus the medical licensing board who ruled against them, right? Okay, and then would any contractor, do you think they would object to this, or any bidder, that they would object to this change? Does this work to their detriment in any way?
I should hope not, because it really seems, it's unseemly, if you know what I mean. It seems wrong for the OPA to have a position on the appeal. The OPA made a decision which should have been impartial, and that should be enough. They shouldn't be at the Superior Court and saying, no, I'm gonna fight and we're gonna stand on my decision, I'm correct.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't,
It's
that would be wrong for me to do that, but I have to.
okay. And their rights are still protected, because this is an appeal. This is not a new trial, right? They're only entitled to an
Everybody has a
appeal
right
of
to an
your
appeal.
decision, not a whole new trial, right?
Well, they have whatever the court procedures are.
Okay, and then on the next section, section 3, I understand it's not regarding appeals, it's regarding audit recommendations, how we enforce these. And I actually like it being in here together because it's very similar. We're not changing whether you are going to enforce audit recommendations. You already have that, if this is written correctly, that you already have that power to file in the Superior Court an action for a writ of mandate to force the implementation of recommendations and corrective action plans. But we are changing how you do that. We're making it easier for the public auditor to, instead of filing a civil complaint to force anybody to implement what you have recommended they implement, we're now just saying instead of that civil complaint, you get to file a petition. And it's pretty much, it's already been ordered, and we're just filing with the court a petition for a writ of mandate, meaning force them to do this. We're not rehashing whether they have to do it or not. We're asking the court's implementation of it, or assistance in implementation of this, of your recommendations. So I like it. I like it. It seems to streamline it streamlines the appeals for you, your agency. I think for everyone else too. Of course, for the government agencies that are involved, I think this would help them. It would streamline it, and they should have put everything already in there on the record. So I don't think it would harm anyone by changing from a complaint to a petition for judicial review. And the implementation of the audit recommendations, I love it. I want to get it done right away. I would, because of what Mr. Burns said, I think that was a great idea. They should put on subsection C, after the public auditor has not concurred with the non-implementation on account of the provided explanation, that should be a period. And then take the rest of this, this is like what the action is, and that should be going, that should just move to the top. I don't think we can do that with this bill. Take, the public auditor may file in the Superior Court of Guam, a petition for writ of mandate, and then bring that all of the rest up to the top. In the event the governor, the committee and rules of the legislature, or the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Guam, A, fails to implement, B, fails to provide a satisfactory explanation as to why have not implemented, or C, the public auditor has not concurred with the non-implementation. Yeah, I think we should do it so that you can do that right away. I would like to see implementation of your audit recommendations. Yes, because they're great, right? And that's why we're doing the audits. And you've done all the work, you've shown how we can make it better for the government, and if we're not gonna make those changes, we are just spinning our wheels. So I love it. I think we should do it right away. So I would advocate that it stay in the bill. I think it's relevant. It's just changing the procedure. I would change the title so that we're talking about procedures for judicial review of decisions made by the auditor in procurement appeals, and the procedures for the implementation of audit recommendation by agencies. But that would be my suggestion, because I'd like to see it implemented right away. So I'd like to thank the sponsor for the bill as well. Susan Masi, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. At this time, I'd like to allow the sponsor of the bill for closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, thank you for having this hearing on Bill 328-37. I want to thank the OPA and the team for providing the testimony for this bill, and of course its suggestion entirely. Very much look forward to pushing this bill out to rectify the situations and ensure that we don't have any future upcoming situations that will make you uncomfortable as the OPA director. Thank you again, Madam Chair. That's all.
Thank you, Senator Quinata. We just have an additional question from the
Sorry,
speaker.
just one more. Has the Public Auditor's Office ever petitioned for a writ of mandate or filed an action? Not yet. So this will be the first. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Office of Public Accountability, Public Auditor B.J. Cruz, Jared Hernandez, Attorney McDonald for your work and your presence and testimony here today. So the committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. Thursday, September 12th. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina, Flores, Perez, Committee on the Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor Procurement, Statistics, Research and Planning, which can be dropped off the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. Being that there are no further testimonies, Bill 329-37 has been duly heard. Stuas Masi. So we are on the third item of our agenda today, and thank you for your patience. For those that were here in the very beginning, we are going to receive testimony on the next item on Bill 329-37 COR, sponsored by Senator Telo T. Taitague, co-sponsored by Joanne Brown, Vice Speaker Tina Rose Muña Barnes, and Senator Joe S. Agustin. It's an act to add a new section 104.116.1 to Article 1 of Chapter 104 of Title 21 Guam Code Annotated relative to real estate brokerage agreements. So at this time, I'd like to open the floor to the sponsor of the bill, Senator Taitague, for her opening remarks. You're recognized, Senator.
Tijus Masi, Madam Chair, and Tijus Masi for holding the hearing on Bill 329-37. Thank you, everyone who's present today for both your testifying and for those who submitted your written testimony to the committee. In the wake of the recent litigation involving the National Association of Realtors, known as NAR, changes to how real estate transactions are conducted are being made nationwide. The NAR has agreed to certain transaction practices that are the basis for the provisions of Bill 239-37. The bill is intended to create a more transparent transaction for the benefit of consumers. It provides clarity to both homeowners and home sellers and their prospective agents. The end desired result will be more consumer-friendly and competitive real estate market. The industry's traditional payment structure had sellers pay a commission that was typically split between the seller's agent and the buyer's agent. Two major changes are required in real estate transactions as a result of the National Association of Realtors Court Settlement Agreement. The first change prohibits agents' compensation from being included on multiple listing services. Again, that is the first change prohibits agents' compensation from being included on multiple listing services. The second change requires buyers' agents to discuss their compensation up front. Bill 329-37 would require that real estate transactions be in writing and that, among other things, agents working with prospective home buyers must now enter into a written buyer agreement before touring a property together. This agreement is designed to inform buyers that they are responsible for paying their own real estate agent if a seller chooses not to cover the cost. So thank you, Madam Chair, for allowing me to do a short briefing, and I look forward to the testimony of those who are here today to speak on the measure in a more, probably have more information than I do, being in the real estate community here on Guam and very well versed on what is happening in the U.S. And we do know it's about 29 states right now currently who are providing 26? Okay, 26 states currently, because of this lawsuit, have already implemented in their state the same legislation. So that's what we are doing here in the territory, just to make sure we're crossing our T's and dotting our I's, and also, most especially, to protect the consumer, as well as our good real estate agents that are here working on Guam. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Taitague. So we did send out invitations to DRT, as well as the Real Estate Commission and the Guam Association of Realtors. And we did receive testimony from our Department of Revenue and Taxation. They provided some written testimony stating that Bill 329 states that clarification in the relationship between the real estate broker or salesman is best achieved through the use of real estate brokerage agreements. Its intent is to have written real estate agreements be a requirement for all transactions, real estate transactions, and it appears to further strengthen the set of related rules. DRT has determined that there are no fiscal impact should this become law. Furthermore, it does not affect the regulatory aspect of any licenses issued by the insurance, securities, banking, real estate branch. So that was a testimony provided. So in the fiscal note, there was a fiscal note waiver because it's considered administrative in nature. Again, it reiterates no fiscal impact to the government of Guam. So I'd now like to open up the floor for those that have come here and waited patiently to testify. So I would go following our sign-in sheet. I would like to recognize Chris Felix. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman Perez, Speaker Terlahi, and Senator Taitague. I'm speaking in favor of the bill. From my standpoint, I think the Guam Association, Muña, our president, will be speaking on behalf of the entire Guam Association of Realtors. But what we have now is all realtors on Guam now must follow certain rules and regs that the senator just discussed. So we have to do things a certain way. And that represents, as near as I can tell, about 75–80% of the market is done through realtors. So 75% of us have to have written agreements with buyers and buyer to be their agent from now on. The other, who are licensed real estate agents on Guam that are not realtors, do not have to have this. So we've set up, unfortunately, an uneven playing field. One group does not have to do something another group has to do. This could lead to we feel this could lead to a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of confusion in the real estate market. So the purpose of this bill, which I appreciate very much, is to kind of give us a level playing field where we all have to follow the same rules and regs. We all have to get buyer agency agreements. It just seems to be the right, fair, and simple way to resolve this issue, this problem. Many other states have agreed to it. Besides the 26, I think there's 15 others now that are in the process of passing the bill. So thank you very much for the time.
All right, thank you, Chris, for your testimony. Next on the list, so again, if I can remind you, if you can just repeat your name, Ms. Muña.
Thank you very much. Thank you, senators, for hearing us out. I did provide a written testimony, and I'll just read it now. So, honorable senators, from the Guam Association of Realtors, they fully support Bill 329, TAC 37. Our endorsement is based on the fact that realtors, as members of both GAR and the National Association of Realtors, NAR, which has over 14,000 members, 14 million, sorry, or 1.4 million members are already required to follow these new rules established by NAR as part of a settlement agreement related to the buyer agency and seller commission lawsuit in the U.S. As of August 17, 2024, we must have a signed buyer agency agreement, either exclusive or non-exclusive, with any buyer before showing properties or proposing or accepting offers on their behalf. We believe that this law should also apply to all active licensed real estate agents and brokers, including non-realtors, those who are not members of GAR or NAR, to ensure a level playing field while providing transparency and protection to consumers. This law would prevent non-realtors from persuading buyers to use their services by claiming they do not require a signed agreement. Making this a legal requirement for all real estate professionals ensures consistency standards across the industry. The legislation is consistent with the practices already adopted in over 26 states, including California, who our real estate forms have been adapted for use in Guam. Additionally, more than 15 other states have proposed similar legislation for the same reason. For these reasons, we are in support of Bill 329 TAC 37. We also extend our gratitude to Senator Taitague, Senator Brown, Senator Muña Barnes, and Senator San Agustin for introducing this important bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Muña. And we also have, if you can state your name.
Sherry Farron. I'm the Executive Officer for Guam Association of Realtors. I think it's important to note that there's a big difference between realtors and real estate agents. And the biggest difference is that as a realtor, we have to follow a very specific code of ethics. Real estate agents are members who have just gotten their license. They're not paying dues into NAR. They're not paying dues into GAR, which is our association. If you belong to GAR, you have to belong to NAR. We have a two-way agreement. So I think that's the biggest difference, that we as realtors follow a code of ethics, and we are bound to respect and take care of those codes. And so I think that if we make this a mandatory written agreement that all real estate agents and realtors have to provide with their buyers, it takes out the opportunity for a real estate agent to say, you don't have to sign anything with me. I don't have to follow NAR's rules, so we don't need to worry about that. Whereas we as realtors have no choice given our licensing with NAR. So I think I just wanted to bring that point up. Thank you. Thank you so much for hearing this.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. And then we also have Ryan de Guzman. Is he here? Did you want to provide testimony? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay, well, thank you all for being patient. So thank you for clearing up the distinction between the realtor and the real estate agent. So the real estate broker and real estate salesman, that's one, I guess it's combining the real estate agent, is that? Okay. And then the realtor is a different category. Okay. And, okay, so then there's no need to include the realtor because you already have the code of ethics in there? Okay. I just also maybe have some questions. I know the bill, it has two parts, right? It has different subsections. And when the language for, there's one language for the seller or lessor with the broker, and then the second part is the buyer and the leasee with the broker. And just, if you can maybe explain, because there's, language is slightly different for both. Maybe if you can maybe explain the differences in the language between the two sections.
In a real estate transaction, in our agency laws, federal agency laws, you represent a real estate broker will represent one side or one party, the seller. That's one side of the transaction. The other side is the buyer. Many years ago, when I first got into real estate, the seller's agent would sub-agent, would allow the buyer's agent to be their sub-agent. That was the way it was for many, many years. And then through lawsuits and everything, they separated, and so buyers have their agents and sellers have theirs. Then this lawsuit completely has separated that. It said buyers now must have separate written agreements and sellers. Right now, almost all sellers have written agreements with their agents. That's the way we've always been operated. This really just adds in the second part, where the buyers now must have a written agreement with their agent.
Thank you.
Sure.
And so the lawsuit, has it been finalized?
No, it hasn't.
No.
Okay.
The final court hearing is not until November, and the DOJ is still involved in working with the National Association of Realtors on what the laws and regulations will be. So we may even have further changes at some point.
Yeah, so that was my question is like, is this cover all the bases? Because I know the lawsuit was antitrust. It was based on an antitrust
Basically,
concern,
yeah.
right? And
The restraint of trade or whatever, yeah.
yeah, so I'm just checking if this bill covers all the
All the parties have agreed to this.
Okay.
But we're waiting for the final court decision, the court ruling.
The other thing, so then I guess we're waiting for possible other changes to occur. Okay, which can result in a new bill. Okay.
Right, which is why we're also asking for this, because that is part of the changes that we are looking down the line. And that's why there are so many states already starting to get on board with this. There are many other states that already have been doing buyer representations for years. So it's just coming around now.
Yeah, and the other thing that's coming out is the settlement agreement. It's how much is it? Billions?
400 million plus, actually it was 500 and some, because 50 million was paid by the RE/MAX group, 50 million was paid by the Century 21 group, and then 420 some million was paid by the Realtor group.
So, I mean, this is a side. So our sellers and buyers, are they going to get some of that settlement money here on Guam?
It's a pretty big class action suit, so I don't think there'll be much what they get out of it, but yeah, there is a settlement coming.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically with this, understand that the business itself we're just basically going old school. So we still can cooperate with each other. It just cannot be done in the MLS. We can't say that. And we're having buyers say, yeah, I'm willing to pay, but if you can get the seller to help me, that would be awesome. So the sellers, we'd have to go and talk to them and let them know what's going on and see if they would even do that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's like, I'm gonna call Chris and see if there's anything that he can do for me or not. So that's basically it. We're getting tighter, communicating with each other more.
So yeah, one of the, I guess the settlement is basically addressing antitrust practices, right? I think one of them was the non-negotiable commissions, the fixed commissions. So I think originally it was 5 to 6%, but that with the change coming?
There is no fixed percent.
Right. Okay.
Everybody is different. It's just that if someone said, hey, I see 6% is usually, then I'm going to do that. But that's what the problem was. There is no fixed percent. I can work for you and say, hey, can you do it for 2? Okay, that's you and I. And then I have to work with everybody else. So, but then I can do it with Telo for 4. So it just depends on what you negotiate with.
Okay. It was a strong feeling of the Realtor organization that the commissions have never been fixed. Okay. However, the court ruled otherwise, and we had to settle, and that's what happened. We still believe when I sit down with the seller, we talk about commissions, and it's his choice. And then I decide, do I want to work for that or not? And it's his call whether he wants to pay whatever percent or whatever.
So it has been negotiable.
It always has been, always.
And then so I guess the research that I've had, that there's also charges of steering and boycotting practices of, I guess, steering and boycotting.
There were, obviously in any industry, there's good apples and bad apples. And the lawsuit also encompassed a group of buyers that said that their agent or their realtor would only show them properties that had the higher commission rate. So on the MLS, the MLS is actually the buyer's agent's contract with what their commission is going to be when they sell, if they sell that property. So they were going through the MLS and picking and choosing properties that they wanted to show based on what the commission to the buyer's agent would be. So that was part of the lawsuit as well, was steering, buyers towards properties where this realtor would get a higher commission or a bonus or whatever was offered in the MLS.
And as Senator Taitague said, that's the second
Correct.
part of the settlement, was that the commission amount is no longer allowed to be put into multiple listing service MLS to avoid that steering in that type of situation.
Okay, great. And of course, there's also greater transparency.
Correct.
With the commissions.
Okay. And the most important thing that I believe has come out of this is that what everyone or what the DOJ, I would say especially, envisions is that the seller pays the seller's agent for their services. The buyer pays the buyer's agent for their services. So it's split. Whereas before it was, you had a listing agreement with the seller. Inside of that listing agreement, there would be a paragraph that would state, me, Mr. Seller, is willing to offer a portion of that total commission to a buyer's agent. That's completely been taken out of the contract. So what is envisioned is the seller pays the seller's agent, the buyer pays the buyer's agent, and if the buyer wants to offer or wants to ask the seller to pay their commission that they owe to the buyer's agent, they can write that in their purchase agreement.
Thank you for that clarification. I guess the other thing that I wanted to ask, let's see. I guess how would that affect pricing on Guam? Would that have an impact on housing prices here? No.
Personally, all I could say, I'm not sure how it'll affect. I don't see that much of an effect on pricing because appraisers are now going to look at that and appraise. Everything's probably going to balance out is what I believe, but we don't know yet. It just started August 17th and we're all kind of lost in feeling our way through. We just spent 4 months rewriting all of our forms. 140 forms that we use had to be rewritten and completely redone. So we're just poking our head above water right now and trying to breathe.
Okay, well, thank you for those responses and addressing my curiosity. I would like to open the floor, Senator Taitague, my apologies.
That's okay. I'll do my closing and have my questions, but my colleagues can go first.
Great. Speaker Terlahi, you're recognized.
Sitos Masi, Madam Chair, and thank you for your testimony. I think I understand what we're trying to do here. I just have a couple questions. So one is, you are saying that realtors, pursuant to the settlement and the lawsuit, are required to do this now, realtors. So if we did include the word realtors in here, there should be no problem. That it would show that this applies to realtors and non-realtors. Same.
Well, no, if you put the word realtor in, that means it'll apply only to realtors. If you have to put the word licensed real estate agents in, that means both realtors and non-realtors, people who are licensed and not a member of the Guam Association of Realtors. If you put the word realtor in, then that will
No, I want to
take
put, it already has the non-realtors, right? But in this description, if this is correct, it says, however they've described it, real estate salesman, or real estate broker, or real estate buyer, seller, leaser, or lessee. It says, yeah, I think that's how they're defining them here. And I want to add realtors and those people. Just so that it makes it very clear in the law, everybody's getting the same treatment. And of course, then the second question is, we're waiting for the final settlement. Should we hold this bill until that time? Because that's the goal, right? Is to match that, what you're required to do under the settlement with what you're going to be required, what everyone else will be required.
Well, I think we're asking that it be considered and voted on now, as 26 other states have done. So we think it's a good thing whether
or not the settlement requires it or not.
It's a great idea to have buyers have their agents and have a signed agreement with them.
All right, can a
And can I just address the thing with the realtors? You're reading the law as it's being written now. Is that what you're looking at?
The bill?
Yeah, the bill, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, so if you just put licensed real estate agents or brokers, that applies to everybody on Guam. You don't have to put realtor there. Realtor is only a member of an association.
So is there such a thing as a non-licensed real, okay, so, okay, all right, then that makes sense.
All realtors must be licensed.
Okay, great. So we want license, that's like our license requirements now. Okay, that's good. And then, can a sale happen between non-licensed people? For example,
a buyer and seller can always make their own deals without an agent. Sure, they can.
All right. So this is only when they need an agent is going to represent a buyer, especially, right? That's what we're trying to protect buyers, so that they are very fully aware of what they're obligated to pay in commissions on that when they buy the property. Okay. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Quinata, you're recognized.
I don't have any questions, Madam Chair. Certainly support the legislation. I think the members of the Realtors Association answered all my questions, and that's really, well, that I don't need to ask any questions. But certainly support the legislation. Look forward to its passage, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Taitague, you are recognized for questions and closing.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you again for you being here today, the three of you. I apologize for it taking so long. Sometimes we can't determine a simple bill can turn up to, lasting an hour and a half, or a simple confirmation can last 2 hours versus, so we were just trying to hope to get you in within a good time. But again, I appreciate your time, and like Sherry, you said, the bad apples, I mean, that's why we're here today, because of those bad apples, and I think it's important that the equal playing field, as you mentioned, Chris, earlier, but I do understand what the the speaker was mentioning, and how you kind of said, as long as it says licensed real estate, because if you look at the bill, and in the section 104116.1, real estate brokered agreement, it goes straight into real estate brokerage agreement must be entered in between real estate broker or real estate salesman or real estate buyer. When we know that there's a difference between an individual who's a realtor and a real estate agent. There's a difference. And most people didn't know that. I mean, a lot of people didn't know that. So I think we can clarify that, to make sure that both entities are both represented on the requirements to provide this agreement made ahead of time before the sale of any property, not only just the sale, but before any discussion is done, and that was the intent. Before a discussion is done on anybody who even listening, on selling your property, that what this bill will do will require that the real estate agent or the realtor discuss the commission up front. And it seems it's very simple. So hopefully we can get this bill on the next session agenda, because I know there's a timeline, and Chris, can you explain the importance of getting this bill out right away rather than waiting?
Well, again, the importance for us is that it's an equal playing field, and that we're all playing by the same rules from our side. Also, from the public side, I think it's a good bill, and one that should be passed as soon as possible, because it's good for buyers and sellers to negotiate with their agents and have in writing what they're going to pay and what it's going to cost them and what services they're going to get. Have it in writing. And Regulation Z, federal law, requires all real estate transactions to be in writing. This just carries it a little bit further. Thank you.
No, thank you. And I think it's important that we start it as soon as possible, because we are in this predicament, this major, civil lawsuit that's happening right now because of the bad apples out there about realtors or real estate agents who have said, oh, we have a fixed commission that we have to follow. It's a fixed commission, when that's not the reality. There is no fixed commission. It's negotiated. Go ahead. You wanted to say?
But yeah, even though the settlement, the court hasn't agreed to the final settlement, we are obligated. We started August 17th.
Exactly.
We've already started to follow our rules and regs. Right. It would be nice if everyone else had to also.
Yeah, and to avoid any other misunderstanding or the confusion of why one group of people have to follow this guideline versus the other doesn't. It doesn't sound fair. So just to make it clear to everyone who's out there looking at selling property or buying property, I think that we should follow this same standard, and especially for the consumer, those who are selling these properties, because they need to know that there is no set commission. And this is one way to ensure that. So I thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity and for listening to my bill right away, and hopefully we can get this out as soon as possible. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, I just want to say one thing too. I think it also benefits all the real estate agents as well, not just realtors, because it is a document that actually says you get compensated for your work and what you're doing when you're working with a buyer. Because if they go around, they may not be compensated. You need to have the paperwork, and that's what we're working for.
All right. Any additional testimony at this time? Okay, I appreciate your testimony and your contribution today. We are still receiving further testimony on this bill till Thursday, September 12th. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, which can be dropped off the mailboxes here, the Guam Congress Building, or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. Being that there are no further testimony or comments, Bill 329-37 COR has been duly heard. Saduas Masi to you. Thank you, and have a great day. Okay, we are on to our last stretch here to hear testimony or receive testimony on Bill 338-37 COR, sponsored by Speaker Teresa M. Terlahi and co-sponsored by Senators Sabina Flores Perez, Telo T. Taitague, Joanne M. Brown, Chris Barnett, Jesse A. Lujan. It's an act to amend Section 3207 and add a new Section 3229.1 to Article 2, Chapter 3, Title 11 Guam Code Annotated, relative to adding a new instructional tasting license. So at this time, I'd like to offer the floor to Speaker Therese Terlahi for any introduction on the bill.
Sidismasi, Madam Chair, and thank you for holding the hearing on this bill so promptly. So this bill, 338, is an act. It will amend sections 3207 and add a new 3229.1 to Article 2, Chapter 3, Title 11, Guam Code Annotated, relative to adding a new instructional tasting license. This is an effort created in response to local entrepreneurs' needs and aimed at filling a gap in our current alcohol licensing laws. Guam's existing alcohol licenses do not cover a hybrid model that allows for businesses to both sell and offer tastings on the same premises. This bill would fill that gap, creating a new niche in our local economy. Essentially, the bill not only has the potential to open business opportunities, but can potentially stimulate our local economy as well. So it creates a new instructional tasting license, which will allow qualified off-sale retailers to offer alcohol tastings to a customer before they actually purchase the alcohol for off-site consumption, such as bottles of wine. This is currently not allowed under existing regulations. They can only purchase with an off-sale retailer. An off-sale retailer can only sell the bottle of the wine to take off premises and consume. So this would permit the businesses such as wine boutiques or wineries to provide customers with an educational experience that promotes the responsible consumption and appreciation of alcoholic beverages. The license holder would also be allowed to host tasting events on their premises. And these similar licenses to the proposed instructional tasting license are already implemented in other jurisdictions, including California. The bill essentially updates Guam's laws to allow us to maintain relevance in today's market and keeps us up to date with the latest industry standards. So the bill sets specific rules to ensure community safety and fair market conditions for all businesses involved in alcohol sales currently. The bill does this by setting strict limits on the size and frequency of tasting events and the amount of alcohol served, creating a structured environment that differs from traditional bars or restaurants and on-premise or on-sale retailers. This approach aims to minimize competition among these businesses and fosters a responsible and controlled setting for alcohol tasting. And as you can see in the bill, it sets the parameters for the Alcohol Licensing Board to grant this instructional tasting license to those who have retail dealers off-sale licenses. So this would be an added category that they can apply for. And the limits that are involved in a tasting, like when you go in and you want to taste the wine, for example, before you purchase a bottle, there's a very strict limit of how many ounces you can consume in that setting. And during tasting events, there's also a very strict limit of how much can be consumed during an event. And for example, for a tasting event where consumers may purchase a taste or an alcoholic beverage, they must be 21 years of age, of course. And there are very strict penalties for allowing anyone under 21 age to participate. The business holding the instructional tasting license may host these events at their establishment, but it shall not be conducted for more than 2 consecutive days per week, nor more than a total of 6 days per month. So this is an occasional tasting event. The tasting event must occur outside of regular operating hours when the business is closed to walk-in patrons, not within the hours of 12 a.m. to 11 a.m. either. And during these tasting events, if they, they'll purchase a taste or a sample of a product, But if they want to purchase the sealed container, like a bottle of wine, the sale may transact. However, the sealed alcohol may only be picked up or delivered at another date after the event. So they're not carrying the bottles out after they've been doing the tasting or participating in this tasting event. The event's maximum 40 attendees allowed a maximum of 3 glasses of 6-ounce wines for the duration of the event. So very strict, very limited, very intimate, 40 people at max. All right, and so I asked my colleagues for their consideration on this bill, and I want to thank Mr. Brian Artero for his help in writing this bill and his recommendations as well. So, Situs Masi, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Madam Speaker. So we did invite DRT as well as the Alcoholic Beverage Control Board to provide testimony. We did receive written testimony from Department of Revenue and Taxation. So I guess I can read it into the record at this moment. So they commend the bill's intent, which will provide a unique opportunity for customers. And so as the agency is tasked with regulating and enforcing 11 GCA Chapter 3, after review of the bill, we recommend the following. Section 3229.1, License Instructional Tasting License, B3, so subsection B3. They stated that a business holding an instructional tasting license may sell a maximum of 3 servings of 3-ounce for tasting per customer per day. And then, so I guess, and then C7, they wrote C7. There's a C7. An attendee is allowed a maximum of 3 glasses of 6-ounce wine for the duration of the event. They state, we recommend changing the word wine to alcoholic beverage as defined in section 3104 because breweries are also authorized to apply for this license. Number 2, we also recommend defining the words tasting and tasting event as intended by the author of the bill. Definitions of these 2 terms would help clarify that a tasting and tasting event are different. Additionally, a fiscal impact note is unclear as we are unable to determine the number of current off-sale licensees who will qualify or apply for this type of license. For your reference, the current count of off-sale licenses is 215 for general off-sale, 53 for off-sale beer, 10 for off-sale wine, 4 for microbreweries. And so should you have any questions and clarification, contact DRT. So that was their recommendations. We did receive other testimonies, all in support of the bill. So I believe we have GCC, Dr. Mary Cotta, UOG's president, Dr. Anita Borja Enriquez, of course, Brian Otero, yourself, Marcus Fong, Frank Kenny. We have a listing, Darren Tele, Michael Louboutin, and Jerry Pastonis, and I think we start receiving testimony. So at this time, I'd like to recognize Brian for your testimony.
Hafa-day, everyone. Thank you for being here. Hafa-day, Madam Speaker Talahi, Madam Chair Perez, Senator Quinata, Senator Taitague, thank you for being here. It's a privilege. I'm very pleased to be able to be here. There's a great opportunity to speak on this issue. My name is Brian Artero, resident of Guam, and I'm here to offer testimony in support of Bill 338-37. As a dedicated supporter of Guam's F&B scene and as a restaurateur who operates 2 restaurants on Guam, I'm here to express my support for this bill, which does seek to permit licensed off-premise establishments such as breweries, wineries, wine shops to offer tasting services within their premises. These interactions will allow for people to make more informed decisions and discover and explore different products that they may have not tried in their previous experiences. The introduction of tasting services in wine shops and breweries has the potential to invigorate our local food scene, as patrons will likely continue on their activities and seek dining options elsewhere. This is a trend that takes place in many cities worldwide, and I've seen it recently really blossoming on the West Coast. If I may use wine as an example, and I do note the recommendations from DRT, and I do agree with those. If I may just use wine as an example, permitting tastings in retail settings, it does have the potential to enrich Guam's culinary culture by fostering a deeper appreciation of the history and the culture behind wine. Such legislation would naturally encourage more interest in wine-paired dinners, which could lead to greater visitation for the restaurant industry. In the design of this writing, we placed in much restraint because it is very important to protect the F&B industry, one of the largest, if not the largest employer on this island. And restaurateurs invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to open restaurants and invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment and payroll, and it's very important to protect that industry. Globally, there's a well-established symbiotic relationship between retail establishments and restaurants. They seem to support each other. When one does well, the other does well. So I do think that this has a great potential to develop a dynamic food and beverage scene on this island. In conclusion, this bill presents an opportunity to also build upon the strengths of our local industry. It's a forward-thinking measure. It encourages growth in the community where food and drink are celebrated and shared and enjoyed to their fullest potential. I strongly encourage the support of this bill. I believe it brings lasting benefits to both retail and restaurant industry. And this bill was written with a future in mind to include more businesses to come. I'm very happy to see that there exist already off-sale 10 different wine establishments and 4 microbreweries. I think that the responsible exploration and education of these products is great. It also allows us business owners to hire more staff. So this just is a rising tide that lifts all ships. And I'm just happy to be a part of it. This is my first time actually doing anything like this, so it feels very rewarding to be involved in this process, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Ms. Masi Brian for being here and assisting with, I guess, consulting with this bill, right? So I'd like to open the floor to Speaker Terlahi if she has any questions.
Sijus Masi, and thank you, Mr. Otero, again, for your help in writing this bill and your testimony today. And I'm very grateful for the recommendations for the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and I believe those can be met. Their suggestions are good. There are also suggestions made by GCC, and some are similar, like to make sure we include beer where we say wine, and that make sure that we include not the restriction, not just for those who are not or who are under 21, but those who visibly intoxicated.
Right.
And we do not recommend the use of a designated representative. This should only be the instructional tasting license permit holder. We do not believe a license is transferable. So I think we'll look at that and study that a little bit. But I do appreciate that there are other, besides GCC and UOG, that there were other retail bars and restaurants that actually submitted testimony. So I think that makes me very confident that the intent of the bill is that they understand it, that they agree that this is not to compete with them, this is to be consistent and to create a new market and actually to help enhance their service of alcohol products as well. So again, I just want to thank everyone. And I think, Madam Chair, I would like to offer my help to incorporate those recommendations. Thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Taitague, if you have any questions.
And thank you, Madam Chair. Hafide Brian, thank you so much for being here.
Senator.
And provide kind of a schooling us on this type of industry that you're an expert in, actually. I mean, all your life you worked in this type of industry, selling from food to beverages. So we look to people with that expertise in order to write legislation or take any recommendations. I'm not sure, Madam Chair, if you had the opportunity to read some of the comments from Reverend Tax earlier. You did, because I had to step away for a second, but you did.
So the chair read it onto the record.
Okay.
And he, as Mr. Tero agreed, I also agree,
Yeah.
and I think we should incorporate those.
Okay, so yeah, the other
I
areas.
think the recommendations are spot on.
Yeah, okay, then you did have a chance to read the Reverend text. Okay, thank you so much. Other than that, that's it. I've worked in bars too for a long time ago, not bars, clubs mostly, jazz bars, and I've seen other places in the States actually that provide this type of event that's going on when it comes to tasting. But I think most importantly, it's not like you can sample, if you sample wine, you have to open the whole bottle, and test it out, and then you take one sip and realize this is too dry, or it's too fruity for a person, or so by allowing these taste tests here, the consumer is not going to waste their money on a full bottle in purchasing it. It gives them the opportunity to have a sample, and if they like it, then they can buy. Because bottles like this can come any range from $45 to $200 for a bottle of wine. There's a great, love for wine and a lot of technique that's used, and why it costs so much because of the rain season. And okay, I went to a wine tasting in Napa Valley. I was going there for the food because I don't drink, I don't drink anymore, but I appreciated the art of making wine, and why certain wines are more expensive than others. And it depends on the grapes and what year it was grown, things like that. So there's a great appreciation. And a lot of people I know who drink wine will enjoy something like this. I truly believe we will benefit from this, as you mentioned in your testimony, for Guam to benefit, and not just the employees working, but the events that can also generate, they actually have these fundraisers that are going on that helps individuals in need, and the donation to those nonprofit organizations is very helpful as well. So before continuing to fall on myself on this, I'll stop there, but I appreciate your time that you're taking out to find a way to make it a lot easier for our people in Guam to enjoy, a social life here, because there's so much hard work right now that we do. So I appreciate your time. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you, Senator Taitague. And just to be clear, so this is an additional license category. It's sort of like considered a hybrid license, right? But it only applies to off-sale. So
correct.
A business that's selling off-sale alcohol can avail of this particular instructional license.
Right. Precisely, only for the off-premise accounts. I also wanted to say that I know that the wholesalers on Guam, which have invested a lot in the community, may not be here today, but I know the commenting period is open for maybe another week or so, and they may have some suggestions and to add anything to their add another category. So if that's something that comes down and as a further suggestion, I like to support the wholesalers in their recommendations as well.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up that point, very important point. But yeah, I just wanted to say that to get this license, you have to have the off-sale license first.
Correct.
Right?
When we were forming, I'm sorry.
And then basically it's on top. So the fee is $200. So on top of the off-sale fee, Right now, it ranges beer, general wine, so they all have all different fees, so that would be on top of those fees.
Correct. I think that to receive this privilege, you should probably invest more in the license. I think that it's good for everybody. Everyone's invested in, and the government should take in more licensing revenue on that.
Oh, so you're recommending to increase the fee?
Well, I was saying that we desire to add, you know, the fee to be able to participate in tasting licenses, that the businesses that are going to be afforded the benefit of this, they can opt to how would you say, enhance their license or not. So the fee is welcome to be slightly higher than the $200 that is there. I'm not trying to say that it should be a premium, but what I'm trying to say is that there should be an additional fee over and above the annual license for the privilege of having that added onto your off-premise license. I think that in our draft, we reflected adding on an additional fee to have that privilege, and that's open for discussion as well.
So yeah, then we're definitely open to any suggestion regarding changing that fee.
Well, I believe the fee would vary depending on the category. So if it's a beer brewery, I think they have a fee. For example, a winery, a wine shop's off-premise fee might be, I think, $400, if I remember correctly. And so 50% more added onto that would be, I would say, fair. You know, paying 50% more of the fee. So if your fee is $400, maybe pay $200 more, and your annual fee now becomes $600 versus $400. And that's, I think, what we reflected in the writing.
Okay, I appreciate that. Maybe if you can clarify, in one part of the bill, it talks about the tasting shall be conducted only during operating hours in which the licensee on whose premises the tastings occur is permitted to sell alcoholic beverages. And then on the next section, maybe you can explain that it states that the tasting event is permitted to occur only outside regular operating hours, but not to occur within 12 a.m. to 11 a.m.
Right. So I'll try to paint a picture of the off-premise business may be open from, say, 11 to 6 p.m. And let's say at a future date, Guam Women's Chamber wants to have a mixer fundraiser. That would be a ticketed and paid event to occur outside of the normal business hours. So maybe that might start at 6:30 and run from 6:30 to 8:30, in which time the mixer would commence and canapes would be served and people would attend and support whatever fundraiser is being. I really see specifically some of these places being able to offer another gathering place that may not be a hotel ballroom and maybe here in local towns, so that people can participate, support businesses, and attend events.
So that's hence the DRT suggestion to define tasting versus tasting event.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
That's a very, very, very good comment.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here and providing testimony and your work. I have no further questions, but again, for those that are listening or interested in writing testimony, we are still receiving testimony until September 12th, 4 p.m. Please address all testimony to Senator Sabina Flores Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement, Statistics, Research, and Planning, which can be dropped off at the mailboxes here at the Guam Congress Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. Being that there are no further testimonies at this time, Bill 338-37, COR, has been duly heard. And we are now going to adjourn. The time is 4:55 p.m. And thank you. Sizuz Masi.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Sorry, did you want to close?